Well, let me come right out and say that I do not know what the Star of Bethlehem was. There's speculation that perhaps it was a meteor or some other astronomical phenomenon. It could have been one of those drones flying over New Jersey, for those of you following the news, which I don't necessarily recommend doing very much. But it is pretty curious that a star should move and then stand over, in this case, a certain place. But we'll get to that in a moment. I was amused during the wonderful Christmas story this morning that the answer, what were there three of, to Adam's son Henry's rejoinder, 3 donkeys. I thought that was a clever answer. I don't know if there were 3 donkeys, but there certainly was at least one famous donkey that carried Mother Mary and baby Jesus over the desert. But I wanted to share with you another little amusing story of a donkey that involves a donkey that Swami Kriyananda would sometimes tell. And this donkey was on his way to the market to be sold with his master, father, and his son. And the father was riding the donkey along with the son walking beside when they passed some people on their way to the market who kind of sneered at them and laughed and said, "Look at that man riding his donkey while his poor little boy is walking along beside." And the man was a little self-conscious, so he got off his donkey and put the boy up on the donkey, and they kept going until they passed some more people. And this time they jeered again and said, "Look at that strong little boy riding on that donkey while his poor old man is walking alongside." And again, the man shook his head and shrugged, and so he climbed up there on the donkey with his boy and walked along. And of course, they passed some more people, and they pointed out, "That poor donkey, 2 people riding on his back, you know?" So they both got off and walked the donkey along, and they were crossing a bridge when someone pointed out, "Look at those fools, both of them walking with a perfectly good donkey." And the old man was so frustrated, he pushed the donkey off the bridge. Now, I don't like that ending, so I'm going to say he turned him loose in a field, but that's not the point. The point is, as again Swami Kriyananda would often point out, is that most people are wrong most of the time. Sometimes you could use, and he would use the word stupid. There's an awful lot of opinions and perspectives about what's going on in the world, and most of them are just plain wrong, often including our own. But the more we search for divine truths in this world and beyond, the closer we come to the one true reality. And most people simply aren't searching for that. And on a deeper level still, as it says very interestingly in the reading today, that it's not only that divine sight, as it puts it, is different than what it calls worldly sight or separate. It says that they're actually opposites, that we could think of them on a whole nother plane, really. And as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, that what appears as day to all men on this earth appears as night to the man of wisdom or the yogi. And what appears as if night to all people is like the light of day to the yogi. And so there's this dichotomy of the divine nature that is simply different from everything going on in this world around us. And that is, in large part, the message of the avatar, of the Christ, of the great masters of this world, to bring that light, which goes beyond all worldly understanding, shines in the darkness, and the darkness comprehends it not. And to be an avatar, to have a message of that magnitude, can be a grand outward mission, such as Christ or Yogananda, or it can be in all obscurity and humility. But nonetheless, it is to be a Christ. The Christ was a title. Interestingly, we think of Jesus Christ, but Yogananda was a Christ, and the Buddha was a Christ. Those were titles. Paramahansa is a title. The Buddha is a title of one who is enlightened, one who is anointed by God, one who is self-realized. And within every soul, within you and me, lies that same latent potential of the Christ consciousness. And so that is the true message of the Avatar. And to come back to the wise men and the Star of Bethlehem, again, this is a mysterious tale. There's very little mention of them in the Bible. It just says basically what the reading said today, that these three mysterious magi, these kings, came from the east. Now, again, let me point out, as you may have noticed, they saw a star in the east. So did they cross the ocean? My geography indicates that they might have had to go west to get to this land we now call Israel. And at any rate, they saw a star that moved and then stayed still. Again, there are not many astronomical phenomena in the sky to explain this, since the stars move or appear to give their motion according to the spinning and the rotation of our planet and all the celestial bodies. So there's obviously something deeper going on here. And again, as Yogananda tells us extraordinarily that the three wise men were Babaji, Christ, and Lahiri, that there's something deeper, much deeper going on here. And that the star that they followed in the east represented in Hebrew a word which references the east side of the body, also in Sanskrit, in India, that the spiritual eye, the star at the point between the eyebrows revealed in meditation and intuition, is the star which guides us to the Christ and which the wise men followed. So this is, at least, again, in part, the deeper meaning of following this phenomenon, this star of inner knowing, of inner realization. And this is the true story of the wise men and of the Christ. That is a living story. It's why it's so dramatic and so captivating, is because it's the story of our own nature, of our own soul. And Christmas is this beautiful expression where the whole world becomes a light and a glow, even if it's on many superficial levels, also on deeper and deeper levels with the light of Christ. And again, to be an avatar is not so important as with the wise men or the star to understand who or even what that means. You know, people speculate, was Yogananda himself the same soul as Jesus? Again, implied by these three masters working together to honor the Christ child. And when asked that question directly, Yogananda simply said, what difference would it make? Although many of us are convinced it might make a difference, and it may be true, it would be a distraction, perhaps, or worse, and take away from that true spirit of unity. At any rate, it wasn't part of Yogananda's message to convey. But again, this inner knowing, more important than who or what these phenomenon or symbols represent, is what is our relationship of our soul to the Christ and to the star and these higher truths. And Yogananda would stress to his disciples, of course, many, many teachings of Raja Yoga and Kriya Yoga and meditation, but again and again he would stress one word: attunement. Attunement with the Guru, with God through the Guru. And to be in tune with the Guru is a subtle and all-important thing that we have to continually refine and practice. Yogananda would sometimes, in simple ways, illustrate this by asking certain of his disciples to go and fetch him a certain object. And he would say, bring me such and such. But he would really be asking them to bring something else. And he was testing their intuition and their ability to tune in. And some of his disciples had developed this ability more than others. Or he would give certain disciples, as God, as the Master, as life sometimes gives us, the task of doing something which they had no qualifications or perhaps any skill or ability or knowledge to even do. But he would give them this task nonetheless. And if a disciple would complain or say, Master, I don't know how to do this, he would say, then start, and I will guide your hands and your feet and your mind in order to do this thing. And that's the attitude of a disciple, that doesn't even hesitate to do that which is given to us, because it's all given by God. And if we are a true disciple, through the Guru for us to do and for our own growth and understanding. And on a more practical level, to be attuned with the Guru, as Yogananda would quote the Bible often, is to all gave he the power to become the sons of God by their attunement and by their receptivity. And to be receptive, of course, we need the practice of meditation. That is the foundation of the spiritual life. And again, yesterday we had this glorious 8-hour meditation in the tradition of Yogananda. That is an exceptional just window of divine grace that never fails to lift us. And our own patience and perseverance is needed every time, on everyone's behalf, the will together to sit those long hours, to overcome restlessness of the mind and so forth. But every time the grace of God comes and lifts us up, and there is a tangible presence of Christ, of God, that comes through those long hours of stillness. But for most of us, meditation may be shorter, on occasion 5 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes. It doesn't matter. What is important is consistency of practice and quality over quantity. Swami Kriyananda would use the word intensity is everything in meditation and in the spiritual life, that we bring the intensity of our heart's devotion, of our concentration. So even in the short meditations, to be fully present with God. And what of the other, 12 or 15 hours of the day when we're active, when we have to work and mind our families and our many responsibilities? Is that time to forget God or occasionally remember God? No, that is the opportunity to bring meditation and activity together. Yogananda said, when you work with the thought of God, it's as good as meditation. As good as meditation. It's not an excuse not to meditate, but it means that finding God in activity is just as important. In that reading from Whispers, there was something about these ugly imps of selfish desire. And I thought of this story of a man in India who was visited by an imp from the devil, which it said ugly imps, but I think they sound kind of cute. I know you're not supposed to root for the bad guys, but I picture this cute little demon. And in this story, the devil dispatched him because this man in India would wake up every morning at 4 o'clock to meditate for 3 hours, every single day, steadfastly to meditate on God before he had to go to work and throughout his busy day. And so regular was he in growing in his God realization that the devil sent this imp to interfere and said, make sure that he sleeps in and misses his appointment with God. And so the imp went and did his master's bidding, and the man slept in, and he missed his meditation that day. And do you know what happened? All day long, all he could think about was God, how he missed his meditation, and how he couldn't wait to get home that night and meditate and get up the next morning and meditate. And all he could think of was God, God, God. And so the devil said, go back and wake him up at 4 the next day. So again, is it an excuse not to meditate? No, but to think of God all the time and to think of God with everything. Yogananda had so many beautiful examples of this in his own life and his disciples. He had one disciple, Durga Mata, who was a beautiful, devoted disciple. And one of the tasks she did at his ashram or at the Hollywood Church in Los Angeles was gold leafing. She was responsible for all the beautiful gold leafing on the architecture there outside the temple. And she asked him, Master, you said that all of our work should be God reminding and should be serving God. How does my gold leafing help that? And maybe she was feeling a little discouraged about this kind of humble task. And he said, oh, sister, he said, countless souls will be drawn to the beauty of God through your work. They will be drawn like a moth to the flame. You shall see, someday you shall see. And over the years at Hollywood Temple, people would come tons of people would come and have come over the many years there. And they would say, we saw the beautiful gold shining temple and we had to come. And they would hear it in Master's time, they would hear him speak and come to the services there. And their hearts were changed and touched and uplifted. And she said she saw over the years the fruit of her humble labors, that God was working through her. And she was, in fact, serving God. Another disciple, Horace Gray, some of you know the story. He would set up chairs at Mount Washington. He used the word spastic. He had some kind of affliction, mental and physical disability, where he could do very little. And he would set up chairs, and Master said, Horace will find God in this lifetime. He will find God because of his devotion. And another of the disciples, who was a little more critical, said, it must be a very simple devotion that he has. And Yogananda said, that's the kind God likes the most. But Horace, towards the end of his life, was so crippled and just physically and mentally unfit that he would just lay there on the grass at Mount Washington. And he would lay there and serve the Guru just by picking weeds out of the grass, in just his simple and humble way. And so in any task, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, that even a flower or a leaf offered with devotion comes to God, straight to God, from our hearts to the divine. And there's no activity. Again, Yogananda himself loved to cook for others, among other things. And when he would cook, he would go, we were told that he would go to like open spice markets, stalls. And instead of buying, this spice and that spice following a recipe, he would just grab a bag of cumin and a bunch of curry and some leaves and herbs, and then he would go and throw it all into the pot. But it wasn't chaos. He was following the light of intuition, of the star. And his meals were delicious. He wouldn't even taste test them. He said, I tasted it at the spiritual eye. He had that divine power to tune in to God in activity, in everything. And when we seek God that way and the light of Christ, everything follows. And this, again, is the true meaning of Christmas, of the Star of David, and of seeking God, of the awakening Christ consciousness, that when we put God first, and when we follow that star, like the mariners used to navigate the seas using only the stars and whatever simple instruments they had, and everything else follows. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything shall be added unto you. Inexplicably, that when we follow the star of God within and without, everything else follows. So, like the three wise men, now we are approaching the Christ child, our journey of our soul. We are following the light that we have seen, and we are nearing the awakened Christ. And similarly, they didn't just come to be there. They came to offer their gifts, to honor and worship him. And now we have to ask, how can I honor the Christ child? What do I have to give? What gifts do I have to give that are symbolic of my humility, my devotion, my sincerity to serve and to be a light of the Christ myself? And this is the true spirit of Christmas, that we are approaching that moment of offering ourselves to God and to Christ, like our children who were so eagerly anticipating Christmas morning, as I was anticipating the all-day meditation. What can I give? What can I give, Lord? How can I serve and grow deeper and more fully in this light of God and Christ? And above all gifts, as Christ said when the Pharisees asked him, what's the greatest commandment? To love God with all thy heart and soul and mind and strength. And also unto this, to love thy neighbor as thyself. And to follow this one commandment above everything else is the greatest gift that we can offer God. It's the only thing that we really need to cling to, and everything else will follow. And as St. John of the Cross said centuries ago, that even one act of sincere love is greater than all the acts of so-called faith and devotion of the clerical church and its many, expressions. That this divine love of our hearts that's been implanted, this spark of divinity, is the one highway by which we can return to God realization. So may the love of Christ awaken ever more fully in our hearts. God bless you. And we'll have one more song to share with you now.